So you mentioned that your grandma had 4 or 5 siblings, and you mentioned Joyce was the youngest. A couple brothers. What were their names?
Oh, that would be Bob and Bill.
What was their maiden name? Calcitis?
My grandmother's maiden name was Rust, and she married Joe Calcitis. Now, I would guess I was around 5 or 6 when my grandpa Calcitis died. I can't say I remember him at all. But my grandmother had severe arthritis, as did many of her siblings. She ended up being bedridden probably when she was in her late 50s, early 60s, because her arthritis was so severe. And after a few years, the kids all said she had to get out of bed because she was too young. So they talked her into living in a wheelchair. And she spent the last 20 years or so in a wheelchair with severe arthritis and in a great deal of pain. Talking about my grandma, we lived with her for a year, which was a big help because I was always there with Grandma, and we became big buddies, and Joyce was there, but she was working. And after, my folks owned a grocery store for that year. After we moved to Oak Park, we would come to Grandma's on Friday, and my mother would pay her bills and do the grocery shopping because Joyce didn't have a car. And then I would often spend the weekend at Grandma's house. So her house and the neighborhood were like a second home to me.
And how old were you when you did that?
Oh, I would guess 9 to 14, somewhere in that age bracket, I guess. My grandma died after I was married.
What I mean by
she was only 69, and I went to Garfield Elementary School for a couple of years.
Still in Adrian?
Still in Adrian, and I loved every minute of school. Well, when I was in the 5th grade, we moved back to 5th or 6th grade. We moved back to Detroit, and that's the year that we lived with my grandmother and my Aunt Joyce, and Mom and Dad bought a grocery store, and they worked 7 days a week, long hours. We only saw them on Sundays when we could go to the store, which was a lot of fun because we could sort of eat what we wanted to. And it worked out good because Grandma and Joyce could kind of keep track of us while they were putting in so many hours. So then I went back to McCarroll again. And at that time, the teachers would get called out of their classroom for long periods. I'm talking about like an hour or so. And I very often was chosen to go into a lower grade and watch the kids, usually with another female student. So that was a lot of responsibility.
So you were like in elementary school and watching younger elementary school kids?
Yes.
Whole classroom?
I can't believe that would happen, but it happened on many occasions.
It was a foreshadow for you being a teacher.
Well, I'd always liked school, so I guess being a teacher came naturally. Not only that, but there weren't a lot of avenues open. I didn't want to go into nursing, and I really didn't want to go into sales. So teaching was one of the few things I could go into. I wanted to be an architect, and my dad discouraged me because he said no one would hire a woman, and chances are, unless I was a shining star, there's a good chance I would not have been hired back in those days.
Wow. So what did you do for fun when you were a kid?
I don't know. I always was outside playing with kids, building forts, playing baseball. I was a tomboy. I loved climbing trees. I hung around with boys and girls.
So did you guys play sports? What was popular back then? You didn't have computer games and the video games.
We just
didn't have TVs.
No, we just played outside. Whatever was the urge, chasing the boys. Like I said, building forts in trees, playing baseball. We did that. I've always been a reader. I've been a reader since probably 2nd grade. So I didn't mind doing that for a lot. Rode my bike a lot. We just were outside all day, every day, if we could possibly be outside. Played Monopoly, played card games, the usual.
So this
kid
might
card
explain
games.
why you forced my kids to play outside every day, all day.
Yes, no doubt it did. Taught them how to play hopscotch and roly-poly.
So, Mom, you mentioned before that you were the first child, but obviously didn't cross your mind that maybe there was a second child. So, do you have any siblings by any chance?
Yes, I do. I forgot about Al momentarily. Sorry, Al. But anyway, I want to go back to when I was born.
Well, who's Al?
I'll tell you in a minute. I was born in 1936, which was beginning to be the end of the Depression. But my dad was really lucky because he always had a job during the Depression. He worked at Bone Aluminum. It was a extruding company. And he ended up getting my uncles.
How did he end up becoming the plant manager? You just don't walk in and become a plant manager. He must have had some experience with the extrusion
No.
business and all that.
No, he started in the factory, and he worked on the shipping department, I know that. And he just sort of worked his way up.
Oh, so he didn't start as the plant manager,
No.
like you said before.
No.
He started early, and over time he made his way up to be plant manager.
Right, right. So he got my uncle jobs. I think he even got my grandpa a job. My grandpa was a Finnish carpenter. He worked on the Fisher building downtown Detroit, and he worked on a few other buildings. I don't remember which ones they were. So we were lucky that we didn't suffer as many people did suffer. And of course, my dad had no investments.
When you said suffer, you mean suffer because of the
Financially.
Depression?
Yes,
Because you were born at the end of the Depression, right?
Right, right.
And so Grandpa always had work through the Depression.
He always worked through the Depression. He didn't have any savings to speak of, so he didn't lose anything like some of the bigger boys did. But when we moved to Collingwood, my brother was born. I'm 4 years older, or he's 4 years younger, and he was born in the house on Collingwood as well. I don't remember too much about our younger life. We had a good time. I can remember my friends from back then playing tag, chasing each other around. Our pictures make us look like we're happy, and I think we were. My mother was Dad was a good provider. We weren't rich, but he had nice steady work. And my mom she was a good mom. She kept us clean, and she cooked meals for us, all healthy meals. But our vegetables were all out of the can, so I didn't eat any fresh vegetables growing up.
You mentioned Grandma was kind of strict, right?
Yeah, Grandma.
Kind of in her own way.
Yeah, my mother was strict all the way through my life. I lived with a lot of rules, and rules were not meant to be broken. But you know what? It was our way of living. I knew it was a little different from my friends' lives, but it just wasn't a big deal to me. It was just the way we grew up. But when I was a very young girl at my grandma's house, she had an ice box, which was common back in those days. We apparently were a little richer because I don't believe we ever had an ice box.
Now let's be clear, what do you mean by an ice box?
Yeah.
So an ice box means a box with a block of ice in it, right?
Exactly, and that was your refrigerator. And the Iceman would come. He'd come pulling a big wagon. He had horses in front, and he'd got his big tongs, and he'd pick up a big block of ice, carry it into the house, and put it in this wooden case with a metal bottom to it, and that was your refrigerator. It was a definite ice box.
So what kind of things did you keep in an ice box back then? I mean, milk?
Milk, butter, eggs.
But not much, right? Because it was pretty small.
Right, right. Which is probably why there weren't a lot of fresh vegetables then. But like Grandpa and I have talked about, we both lived the same kind of life, and you only took a bath once a week. And that was on Saturday night.
Same for you.
Same for me, and for a lot of friends of our generation. Plus, every Saturday night.
Did you look forward to it, or did you like dread bath that it was like, woohoo! I get to take a bath, thank God.
It was just you take a bath on Saturday night. That was it. Anyway, we also, Saturday night, we got a teaspoonful of cod liver oil, which was supposed to keep us from getting sick, and I guess it did. And along with your cod liver oil, you got half an orange to suck on to get rid of the flavor. There again, many people of our generation did exactly the same thing. So I guess it was more common than not.
So Dad wanted me to ask you about the sheeny or a sheeny, or what is a sheeny?
Oh, well, when you lived in Detroit, you had alleys, which I guess are quite common in large cities. Usually the alley had backyards on either side of it, and there would be sheenies who would have a cart. Sometimes they'd have a very small wagon with a horse. A lot of times they pushed the cart, and what they did is they did an equivalent of dumpster diving. They went through people's garbage and picked up what they could use, what they could sell, and we had our sheenies there.
And everybody called them sheenies?
Yes.
Is that a bad name?
I don't know. It's what we called them. I never heard that it was bad or good. It was just a sheenie. Now, when we moved out to Oak Park, we didn't have alleys because that was in the suburbs. Therefore, we had no sheenies.
I don't know, today, Mom, people come by my house and we call them garbage pickers, and they do the same thing on Sunday night. They're looking dumpster diving.
Dumpster diving, garbage pickers,
Yeah,
sheenies.
you've been known to dumpster dive in your later years too.
Oh, I love to dumpster dive, but I only dumpster dive for boxes. But that's another story.
So back to when you were, before you were 10, what were the things you liked to do? I mean, were there foods you liked to eat? Were there kind of candies that you liked? Did you go to, I mean, we've seen the little things about the soda fountain places. What did you go do when you were little?
Well, the ice cream man came by, so that was a big treat to get ice cream from the ice cream man, although we couldn't do it all the time. That was really a treat. My grandma, because she was housebound, she would send me to the store, which was a long block away, to buy a pint of ice cream, so that was a favorite treat. We had, I don't know whether we had treats or didn't have treats. I know the rare times we had company, we'd have pop and potato chips, but I don't remember an awful lot of treats. And like I said, my mom cooked a well-balanced meal every single night. So that's about all. Food doesn't...
I mean, toys, I mean, I know you invented the Barbie, so it didn't exist when you were little.
I did invent the Barbie because I didn't like playing with a baby doll. I wanted a doll that had nice adult clothes. Obviously, the Barbie, excuse me, watching the Tiger game. The Barbie was not invented yet, but that was my idea. I also invented the electric wire that goes through the windows.
The rear window defogger.
Yeah, the rear window defroster, because it was my job in my dad's car to scrape the inside of the windows.
Inside of the windows?
The inside of the windows, yes, because it would get all frosted over in the winter. And so as a kid, I thought, why can't they put electricity through the glass, which they ended up doing a great many years later.
So you should have grown up in Dad's family. You wouldn't have to do that because they didn't have a car.
Well, also, I was the oldest, so I was responsible. Al was the baby. He didn't have to do anything.
So were you good friends with your brother when you were little, or not really? He was how many years younger than you?
4 years younger. But we were good friends. Obviously, we had our own separate friends, but...
I mean, you were 10, he was 6, so I mean, how good of friends can you be with a 6-year-old?
Yeah, but we always got along.